Our Gospels for the next few weeks are going to take a detour from the Gospel of Mark, which we've been reading through, in order to cover an incredibly important section of the Gospel of John, John chapter 6. So we'll hear from that chapter for the next few Sundays. The miracle that we hear today is the only miracle that's recorded in all four of the Gospels, which is an indication to us of how important this particular miracle was for the gospel writers and also for the church. And so we can also see with this miracle in the gospel that this is the time in which the people want to make Jesus king. There were other miracles that Jesus had already worked and they didn't respond that way. But when they see this miracle, the multiplication of the loaves, they said, we need to make him king. And so what is it about this particular miracle that led to that reaction? And part of the answer to that is a prophecy from the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is one of the first 5 books of the Bible, so the Jewish people would have known it very well. And it was Moses' last testimony to the people of Israel before he died and before Israel went into the promised land. And what it says in Deuteronomy 18 is that even though Moses is going to die, he gives a prophecy that the Lord will raise up a prophet like him, like Moses, and to him you shall go. So the people of Israel had been waiting for centuries for a prophet like Moses. And what did that mean for them? Well, Moses went up on Mount Sinai and gave the people the law, and he also fed them with miraculous bread from heaven. The manna that the people ate every morning, there would be manna on the ground and they would gather it up for 40 years, and that's what they ate in the desert. So the people were waiting for the one who would come and bring back the manna, the one who would feed the people with miraculous bread. That was the sign that they were looking for. And so that's why when they see him feed the 5,000, they say, this is the one who is to come. And they tried to make him king. Now for the people, this was the miracle they were waiting for. But for Jesus, this was not the miracle he was preparing for. This miracle of the multiplication of loaves was going to point to an even more important miracle. And so the true manna that Jesus was going to give was not the multiplication of the loaves here. It's what would happen at the Last Supper. And that's when he took bread and changed it into his own body and blood, into a supernatural food that he would feed not only to his disciples, but to his entire church throughout history. And so the miracle that Jesus was preparing for was the Holy Eucharist. That is the true manna, not the multiplication of the loaves that fed the 5,000. People will sometimes take the Eucharist for granted. Like it's not that big of a deal. And maybe it's because we come to Mass every Sunday and maybe it becomes routine. Or, some people don't even come to Mass on Sundays if they have something else going on that they think is more important. They might skip here or there. Or some people don't go to church at all anymore. So I think it's important for us to take a moment and reflect upon the miracle of the Eucharist. This is the greatest miracle that Jesus Christ has given to his church. He feeds us with his own body and blood. And I think it's important for us to reflect upon that and to be amazed by the simple reality that the Lord of heaven and earth has gathered us together, and this very day is going to feed us with miraculous bread, supernatural bread that's designed to give us life. Who are we to be invited to God's table? And yet in his generosity, he does just that. This is something that the bishops, when they began the Eucharistic revival, they want to rekindle the sense of Eucharistic amazement in the hearts of all of us. That's why they've called for this Eucharistic revival. I recently heard a story about Alfred Hitchcock, He's one of the greatest film directors in the history of our country. They call him the master of suspense. But Alfred Hitchcock was Catholic, and now that he's passed away, I'm sure he's even happier that he's Catholic than he was when he was here on earth. But for a period in his life, he drifted away from the church, but then he came back, and he had a very fervent devotion to the church and to the Eucharist. And when he was on his deathbed, he called for a priest to come. And when the priest heard that Alfred was calling for him, he rushed off to go to Alfred's bedside. And after he had talked to Alfred for a few minutes, he said to the priest, "Father, I'm glad you're here and I have the chance to talk to you, but did you bring the Eucharist?" And the priest, kind of embarrassed, realized he had not brought the Eucharist. He had rushed off and he had forgotten that, so he had to go back to church and get the Eucharist and bring it to Alfred Hitchcock in order to give him Eucharist, the viaticum, food for the journey. And Alfred, he would often, when he would receive the Eucharist, they said that he would have tears rolling down his cheeks because he was so touched by the gift of the Eucharist. I've been called on many different occasions to the bedside of someone who's nearing death. And it's interesting that these people who are in a condition where sometimes they hardly have the strength to even keep their eyes open. But at a moment like that, when they know they're preparing to leave this world, the one thing that they want more than anything else is the Holy Eucharist. And sometimes they can't even receive an entire host. Sometimes I have to break off a tiny fragment, and it's a struggle for them even to receive that. But why is it that at a moment like that, people's desire, their one desire, is for the Eucharist? It's because as they're preparing to leave this world, they want to experience the presence of their shepherd. They want communion with Jesus Christ. They want his strength to be in their bodies. And they want to experience the promise that Jesus gave to us, "I am with you always." That's what they want to experience and receive the grace from and the strength from as they prepare to leave this world. And if that's how we as Christians want to die, if that's how we want to leave this world, shouldn't that be how we live our lives? Shouldn't we want to live our lives with our hearts on fire for love of Jesus Christ and for a deep desire to receive the Holy Eucharist and for intimacy with Christ and Holy Communion? Is that not how we should live? And so as we continue with Mass today, I encourage us to pray that every one of our hearts might be amazed by the gift of the Holy Eucharist, that we might be on fire with love of God, and that we might hunger for the Eucharist more than we hunger for natural food, and that we might hunger for the Eucharist more than we even desire our life in this world.